It's
Right.
a habit. It's learned, and you can unlearn it, or you can learn something else in its place. You may have a hard time unlearning it, but you can find something that's preferable that will take over because it works better,
Hmm.
which is one of the things you do when someone tries to learn a different form of breathing. But it is, first of all, most people don't realize that they have dysfunctional breathing
Hmm.
habits. I know someone. I mean, I have so many examples. I'll give you an example of someone who really he's a really well-known physicist, and he got very interested in breathing, and he worked with a friend of mine. He was on sabbatical leave, and he worked with a friend of mine, Dr. Robert Fried, who's a real major leading person in the area of breathing physiology and psychology. And they published some papers together, and he got really involved, this physicist, in the technology of breathing and so on and so on. And he could do all these fancy things with his breathing and controlling his carbon dioxide level, do whatever he wanted, so to speak. But I was delivering a lecture in Israel at one time, and I needed a volunteer, and he raised his hand. He said, "Peter, I'd like to come up. I'm really interested in this, et cetera, et cetera." And it turned out he had a lot of brain fog. We have these forms that people fill out, a lot of brain fog issues and a sleep apnea issue he'd had for decades and decades. Well, I noticed in the form that he filled out that he had asthma when he was a elementary schooler, like 7, 8, 9 years old. He had asthma, and he would wake up in the middle of the night with an asthma attack. And so he was afraid as a little boy to go to sleep. He didn't want to lay down and go to sleep. He thought he was going to have an asthma attack.
Mm.
So what happened is that he would lie down, and what he had learned without realizing is to take over the breathing. He was worried about getting enough oxygen and so on. So when I worked with him, I said to myself, there may be a problem here. So I had him lie down. And when he laid down, his breathing went completely awry. He lost all this carbon dioxide that's essential, which will lead to radical vasoconstriction in the brain. You can lose up to 60% of the blood in the brain. And so that brain fog came on immediately. As soon as he laid down, he was in a brain fog.
Mm.
And this is what happens to him when he lays down. He had no idea it had any connection with breathing at all. He didn't know there was any connection. But when he laid down and he realized what was happening, and I asked him to bring his breathing back to normal, he couldn't do it when he was laying down. He was unable to take charge of it and restore it. He basically was out of control with it. So we worked together where I worked with him, where he became familiar with his habits. So when he laid down, he would breathe this way. And so initially I taught him to lower his carbon dioxide level on purpose.
Hmm.
And then he learned to bring it back to normal. Bring it down, bring it back to normal. Most people, when they overventilate and the CO2 level goes down, they can't get back. They get trapped in it. It's a vicious circle. They try to get more air and everything gets worse. So I worked with him. So he became an expert at doing the wrong thing. It's called negative practice in behavior therapy. Practice the wrong thing. So he was really good at it. And he could disengage it, engage it, disengage, engage, disengage. And then I had him work on the laying down position to control it in that situation. So he was able to do that. And over a period of time, the brain fog was gone, which he would have all morning, and the sleep apnea was gone after, about he was almost 80 years old. So it'd been 70 years.
Wow.
So there's a habit there that
Hmm.
needed to be addressed. Despite his knowledge, despite all his work working with breathing, he never addressed the habit. The habit needs to be addressed. That's the message. And so to identify that habit, you have to know something about yourself. You have to develop an awareness. And as you develop that awareness, you have to learn the symptoms that come on associated with the habit. You have to learn to become comfortable with those symptoms. You have to know how to bring those symptoms on and then disengage them. And there are some simple things that you can do to learn to do that kind of thing.